everyone. Thanks for joining in. Students, before we move on, I want to understand how many of you think that law is a difficult subject. And why is it difficult? Is it because of the terminologies or sections, or is it just the phobia? It's all in your head. Okay? Worry not. Today we have CA Anushri Agrawal with us. Anushri Agarwal is a chartered accountant and a company secretary. She has been a rank holder AIR 14th, 5th and 4th in all three levels of CS course. After working for a brief period in PwC's direct tax team, she began teaching law and income tax to CS students in Chennai. It's been 5+ years now since she started teaching and is also associated with academies across Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, and Chhattisgarh. With several exemption scorers and rank holders, results of her students speak for themselves. Today, ma'am will be guiding you all on how to approach the law subject, how to read and score well. I'm sure by end of the session, you will all find the subject interesting rather than fearing it. Now I request ma'am to take over and guide the students on strategy to clear business law paper with some great marks.
So our discussion today, guys, is going to be about paper 2 business laws. Your CA foundation course, second paper, has two parts to it, business laws and business and correspondence reporting. My discussion with you today is going to be all about the part A of our second paper, business laws. Now, like how I just told you, your second paper has two parts, business laws and BCR. Business laws is asked in the examination for 60 marks, whereas BCR for 40 marks. Our entire discussion today is going to be about these first 60 marks, part A of business laws. Alright, now CA foundation is the very first stage of your CA career. It is also the most important phase because it is here that your foundation gets built. So if your basics are right, if your basics are on point, then half the job is done. Now, as you would already be aware of, paper 1 and paper 2 of this level, of your CA foundation level, are descriptive papers, right? They are subjective, they are descriptive. When I say descriptive papers, it would mean that you would have to write out the entire answer, and it is not just an MCQ based examination. Whereas paper 3 and paper 4, they are your MCQ based papers, entirely purely MCQ based papers. Paper 1 accounts and paper 2 law and BCR alone come under our descriptive category. Alright, now what you should be aware about is that about paper 2 alone, if I talk about, the first 60 marks business laws comprise of totally 5 chapters. What are these 5 chapters? Number 1, we have the Indian Contract Act. Number 2, we have the Sale of Goods Act. Then we have the Indian Partnership Act. Then we have the LLP Act, and finally the Companies Act. So most of you who are attending this session today are students who are going to be writing in the May 2021 exam, isn't it? And by now all of you would definitely be aware of your syllabus. So these 5 chapters are the composition of your business laws paper. Now in the session that we are having today, in this webinar, my focus would be first of all on telling you about the paper, about the subject, telling you a little bit about how the question paper is going to be. Then we will discuss about how to prepare for this paper, how to prepare ourselves for the most difficult law paper out there. Alright. Then we will learn how to present our answers in the examination, how to utilize those 3 hours in the best possible manner. Okay. Then we will also look at what are the areas to focus on. I'll be telling you all about some topics which in my opinion should be important for your May 2021 examination. And towards the end, we will leave the stream open for questions. Alright guys, so are we clear till here? Are we all clear about what we are going to be having, what the session is going to be all about? what are the kinds of discussions we're going to be having, right? So I will be leaving the floor open to your questions to the end of the session. So let me start with the points that I have lined up for you all one by one. First of all, I wanted to begin with by telling you all about these chapters and what is the weightage of each of these chapters in your examination. Your first chapter, the Indian Contract Act 1872, this is obviously the biggest, the lengthiest and the most important out of all your 5 chapters. Alright, this is the most important out of all your 5 chapters and you would be spending considerable time studying this chapter. Now in this chapter, what do you study? Here you study that if you are entering into any contract, if you are entering into any business relationship with another person, how do you enter into the contract? What are the points which you should be aware of? What are the different types of contracts? What are the steps? There is first an offer, then the other party accepts the offer, then there is consideration, then we talk about free consent, then we talk about possibility of performance. So this chapter is the most important and in my opinion, it is also the most interesting chapter. I used to enjoy learning this chapter as a student and today I enjoy teaching this chapter as a faculty. This chapter is asked easily for 15 to 20 marks in your examination. Alright, then the second chapter in your list is a Sale of Goods Act 1930. Sale of Goods Act will be asked roughly around 12 to 15 marks. In this particular chapter, you will be learning about what if I enter into a contract relating to sale of goods. If I am selling goods to another person, I am the seller, he is the buyer, and how will our contract look like? What are the points which we should keep in mind while entering into this contract? What are the rules and regulations that will apply on this contract? That is what you will be learning under your Sale of Goods Act 1930. Then your third chapter, your Indian Partnership Act. This would be a chapter which you would be finding extremely easy because I'm very sure you all would have learned about this chapter a little bit in accounts in your 11th and 12th standard when you learnt about partnership accounts. So some basic concepts like who are partners, what is profit sharing ratio, what are the features of partnership, the definition of partnership, all these basic points you would have anyways already studied when you would have learnt about your partnership accounts in 11th and 12th, isn't it? Now that aside, if I talk about Partnership Act from your law syllabus perspective, understand that this one chapter is going to be your most important chapter because this is going to be the chapter where you can score a lot. This chapter is small in size, especially when compared to Sale of Goods Act and Indian Contract Act. At the same time, it is simpler than your Indian Contract Act and your Sale of Goods Act. It is way simpler and it is going to be asked for a solid 12 to 15 marks. So this should be one chapter which you are going to be extremely confident about, extremely thorough about with absolutely no doubts. Okay, then your fourth chapter you have the LLP Act 2008. A small chapter will be asked for roughly 3 to 6 marks in the examination. Now this chapter again is very small and if you look at this chapter, the content of this chapter, you will realize that there is absolutely no scope in this chapter for the examiner to twist questions. In this such a simple chapter that the examiner can only ask you straightforward questions. The examiner has no opportunity in this chapter to twist questions. So, if you are going to be thorough with this chapter, 3 to 6 marks, whatever is asked from this chapter, you can be sure about those marks. Contract Act is one place where the examiner might twist questions. Examiner might test your understanding majorly in chapters like Contract Act and Sale of Goods Act. These two chapters, the first two chapters, are very interesting chapters, but they're also lengthy chapters. At the same time, Indian Partnership Act and LLP Act, they are considerably smaller in size and they're also scoring. So if you are somebody who believes in smart work, then these two chapters you should be totally thorough about. Okay, then coming to Companies Act. Companies Act 2013, your fifth chapter in your CA Foundation syllabus. I give this chapter extreme importance of a different level. Why? Because this is one such chapter which you will find in all the 3 levels of your CA course. You will be studying a little bit about Companies Act now in your CA foundation. Then you will be studying a lot more in your CA intermediate, and way more in detail you will be studying Companies Act again in CA final. You understand the importance of this law from the perspective of your course. So in your CA foundation, what you study under Companies Act will build your foundation about this particular statute. Your knowledge base about Companies Act gets formed in your CA foundation level. So you should be very, very good in relation to this act, not only from your CA foundation's perspective, but also from the perspective of CA course as a whole. Because whatever knowledge you gain now in your CA foundation for this chapter will help you also in your CA intermediate and will help you also in your CA final. Alright, so coming back to our discussion. So what are the points we have discussed till now? We know about what are our 5 chapters and we roughly know the weightage of each chapter. Alright, now if you look at these 5 chapters, if you look at the business law syllabus, you will realize that the syllabus is something which teaches you about the laws that govern basic business transactions. That is why it is called business laws. We are not talking over here about other laws like labor laws, you have social welfare legislations, you have consumer laws. We are not talking about all those. We are talking only about these 5 business laws, laws that govern our day-to-day business transactions. Okay, now out of these 5 chapters, I have already told you the importance of each chapter. I told you that the Contract Act and the Sale of Goods Act are important from your examination perspective. These two, you will find majority of the questions in the examination from these 2 chapters. Then comes Indian Partnership Act and LLP in the next category. These 2 chapters are important. They do have considerable marks, especially when compared to how big these chapters are. They are not very big. They are very simple to study also, and they are also very scoring. One more reason why you should be very, very thorough about the Indian Partnership Act is that, like how in LLP Act I told you that the opportunities for the examiner to twist the question are very less, same goes even to the Partnership Act. Even if the examiner wants, he cannot give you a very tricky case study. It will be limited. Whatever the amount, the extent to which the examiner can twist the question will definitely be limited in Indian Partnership Act. Companies Act, extreme importance. Why? Because not just from the CA foundation level I'm talking about this particular chapter's importance from the perspective of your entire course. Okay, so all the 5 chapters, if you noticed, I said very important for all the 5 chapters. So this shows that you cannot skip any of them. You should not skip any of these 5 chapters. All these 5 chapters have their own importance, and because these 5 chapters form 60 marks of your examination, which is no less. Alright, if you are aiming for a rank, these 60 marks are going to make a huge difference to your total. So these 5 chapters, all of them, you have no choice. You've got to be thorough about them all. You've got to know about them all. I ended up using the word important for all the 5 of them. Alright, but still a lot of times students ask me, what is a sequence? What is the order in which we should study these laws? Day before the examination, ma'am, I am sitting with Indian Contract Act to revise this chapter. It is not even getting over. How do I revise the other laws the day before the examination? I get this question so often, and I would like to use this platform to address this question. See, listen to me. When you are studying law, when you are going through your syllabus, when you are studying business laws for the very first time, you will go in the exact same order. You will first learn the Indian Contract Act, because whatever knowledge you get from the Indian Contract Act will help you understand Sale of Goods Act and Partnership Act better. Whatever knowledge you get from Partnership Act will help you understand LLP Act and Companies Act way better. You're understanding? So when you're studying the laws for the very first time, I request you all to focus on the subject in the exact same order. First to Indian Contract Act, be thorough about it. If you're thorough about it, your understanding about Sale of Goods Act and Partnership Act will automatically get better. If you're thorough about Partnership Act, when you study about LLP Act and Companies Act, your concepts will become even more better. That is how all these concepts are, all these chapters are linked. So I want you all to follow the exact same order when you are studying for the very first time. Okay, but the day before your examination, I don't want you all to do the mistake of studying these chapters or revising the chapters in the same order. This is one huge mistake which students do, which ends up in making them feel very nervous, very underconfident the day before our exam. See, listen to me. The eve of the examination, I do not want you all to start with the Indian Contract Act. Finish the other 4 chapters. In my opinion, first finish off the Companies Act, then finish off the Indian Partnership Act, then finish the Sale of Goods Act, then finish the LLP Act, and then come to the Indian Contract Act. In my opinion, this is the sequence which you should be following the day before your examination to revise this subject. Follow this order. Because once you do this, once you finish Companies Act, you will be able to finish very quickly. You will feel confident, yes, I'm done 1 out of 5 chapters. Then you will pick Partnership Act. Why Partnership Act? Because Companies Act might have been little difficult. Partnership Act will be nice, relaxing, easy chapter. You will be able to finish it. Then you will pick Sale of Goods Act, one complicated chapter. After finishing Partnership Act, Sale of Goods Act, you will have the energy to finish it. Then one very small act, LLP Act, you will finish off. It will take you hardly 1.5 hours to revise this chapter. And then you will feel so confident that I am done revising 4 out of 5 chapters. I have just 1 chapter left, which is the Indian Contract Act. And then you keep revising that. Alright, Vikas, I got your question. You're asking me to explain about the topics to study under the Contract Act. Please be a little patient, alright. When I come towards the end of our discussion, I have made a list of some areas that you should be focusing on for your May 2021 examination. So there I'll tell you about what portions or which chapters to focus on under the Contract Act. Alright, please wait for the end of the session for that. Alright, so are we all clear with the discussion that we have had till here? Yes? Please don't get confused. When you are studying for the very first time, I want you to follow the exact same sequence as given over here. First Contract Act, then Sale of Goods Act, then Partnership Act, then my LLP Act, and then Companies Act. But day before the examination, I don't want you to make this mistake of studying in the exact same order. I want you to follow this order which I have highlighted over here. First Companies Act, then your Partnership Act, then your LLP Act, then your Sale of Goods Act, and lastly your Indian Contract Act. See, I'll tell you why exactly I'm focusing so much on the day before your examination. You spend 9 to 10 months preparing for an examination. And how well you do that exam depends upon what you write in those 3 hours in the examination hall. What exactly you write in those 3 hours in the examination hall depends upon how your mental state is at that time. And how is your mental state in those 3 hours will depend upon how your yesterday went. If the day before the examination you were calm and confident, you will be able to enter the examination hall confidently. And if you're able to enter the examination hall confidently, there itself half the job is done. I don't want any hands getting cold, any nervous attacks, nothing required. We will walk into the examination confidently and we will ace the paper. You understand? Rishika, I'll come to your questions. All these questions please point out towards the end, because all these questions we'll handle in the question answer session. Rishika's question, what is the weightage of amendments? We'll come to all that a little later towards the end of the session. Are you getting it, guys? You know what, I read this somewhere. I'm getting reminded of this quote. That quote said, practice like you've never won, but perform like you have never lost. Did you hear what I said? It's a very interesting quote. I'll just write that quote over here. Listen to this quote and try to understand what it says. It says, practice like you've never won. Perform like you never lost. I remember reading this quote in some sports magazine somewhere. I read that this is an advice which coaches give to sportsmen. They ask sportsmen to practice like they've never won. Put in all the hard work. You've never won in your life before and you want to win. Put in that kind of effort when you practice. But in the match, when you're performing in the field out there, be super confident. Be confident. How confident? As if you have never lost ever before. The same tip I would also give to you all students writing the CA Foundation course. When you prepare, when you're studying, when you're learning, when you're putting in the effort across those 9 months, put in effort like as if you've never passed. You've never done anything good before. You have to win. You have to prove yourself. Put in that kind of effort. As if you have never done anything significant till now and this is your first big exam and you want to leave a mark. But those 3 hours which you write in the examination hall, those 3 hours, there should not be even an iota of doubt anywhere. Those 3 hours in the examination hall, you should write the examination, you should perform with full confidence. Because if you get scared, half the things that you have learned, all the effort that you have put in goes waste. What's the point? You understand? So that is why the sequence in which you're going to be studying the chapters the day before examination makes a huge difference. So please remember this. I hope you've made a note of the sequence. Yes? Please quickly make a note if you have not made a note. Companies Act first, Partnership Act then, second, then your Sale of Goods Act, then LLP Act, and lastly your Indian Contract Act. Alright, fine. Now let's go to the next part of the discussion. The next discussion that I'm going to have with you is a very, very important tip, a very important suggestion from my end to you all. When you study, or even when you're attending your classes, when you're watching my videos, throughout, I want you to maintain 3 pieces of paper. Alright, I want you to maintain 3 full pieces of paper. A4 size, ruled, unruled, I don't care. 3 pieces of paper should be in your hand when you're watching every single video on the app. What will these 3 papers be all about? In the first paper, you will be writing about section numbers. As and when you come across section numbers which you want to remember, which you think are important, you will keep making a list in the first paper. Let's say you studied about Contract Act first. In Contract Act, you came across section 2 clause H. So as soon as you came across that section number, you will open this first sheet of paper. You will write section 2 clause H. What is it about? Definition of contract. Then let's say you came to the consideration chapter. Consideration chapter, you came across section 25, which says even though there is no consideration, in some exceptional cases, contract will be valid. So what are those cases given in section 25? Write down the section number again in that list. You understood? Don't unnecessarily end up writing every section number in this list. Only write down important section numbers. See, our brain cannot remember 1000 section numbers. But if we are going to ask our brain to remember just 20 to 25 section numbers, possible. Alright, so some section numbers. See, I don't say it is mandatory for you to remember section numbers. I don't say it is mandatory for you to write section numbers in the examination. But as a professional student, it makes a difference even to us and to our level of knowledge if we are able to understand some basic section numbers. If you are able to remember some basic section numbers and write them correctly in the examination, it will make some impact on the examiner. What does the examiner think about my paper? If he sees some section numbers in my paper, he will think, okay, yes, this child has studied, this child has prepared. So he will correct that paper with that mindset, isn't it? So, but then never make the mistake of writing wrong section numbers. No section number is better than wrong section number. Alright, so don't make the mistake of writing the wrong section number. Some 25 section numbers, 20 to 25 section numbers, whatever you think is important, whichever concept is important, obviously that concept section number will become one of the important section numbers. So totally some 25 section numbers. I want you to make a list. As and when you study, as you keep coming across the section numbers, please keep making a list. This is the first sheet of paper. In the second sheet of paper, you will write about all the case studies that you have been studying. Across the entire syllabus, you will be studying a lot of case studies. All of them are not important. If you have been following my videos on the LearnCab app, I would have taught you about all the important ones. If you do all those case studies, all those case laws which I have done in those videos, more than enough, way more than enough. Alright, so those case laws, as and when you come across, keep making a list over here. You studied about types of offer. You came to general offer. Under general offer, you learnt about Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Ball Company. Make an entry in that second paper about this case law. You studied a little more, you came across Lalman Shukla versus Gauri Dutt. Make a note again in that piece of paper. Then you came to your free consent chapter. Under fraud, you learnt about the case Derry versus Peak. Make a note of that case study. You went to Companies Act, you came across the case study, let's say Reach versus Ashbury Railway Iron and Goods Company Limited. You will make a note of that case study. You're understanding my point basically. As and when you keep coming across case studies, keep making a list of those case studies in the second sheet of paper. Okay, then in the third piece of paper, what you will be writing is all the Latin maxims. Throughout the syllabus, there are some 15 to 20 Latin maxims which are there in your study material. Those Latin maxims you should be aware of, and wherever required, you should produce them in your examination paper. So as and when you keep coming across the Latin maxims, keep filling in the third sheet of paper. Okay, so these three pieces of paper, when did you fill in, when did you make? You did not make them the day before the examination. No, you are making these three papers as you revise, as you study, as you keep watching the videos one by one. These three pieces of paper you will keep updating. The day before your examination, 2 hours before your examination, you will take out these three papers. You will read these three papers just the day before your examination, just 2 hours before your examination, you will read them. The summary of these entire lists of section numbers, case laws and Latin maxims will be in your hand. You don't have to flip pages if you forgot a section number. You will simply look at this piece of paper and it will be right there in your hands. You will thank yourself profusely the day before your examination for maintaining these three sets of paper. I want you all to do this. If you do this for foundation, trust me, you will want to do this even for your inter and final level, because you will realize how helpful this was the day before your examination. See, why am I asking you to make a list just of these three things? Because these three things, no matter how many times you study, it is in these three places where you might end up making a mistake. You might forget the name of a case study. You might get confused about some section number's name. You might get confused about the spelling of some Latin maxim. You're understanding? So this is something which I want each one of you to do, and also ask your other friends in CA Foundation to do. My students have been doing this, and I cannot tell you how often I get calls the day after the examination that, ma'am, those three papers, they helped us a lot. You will feel so confident because these are the three things which are difficult in law paper. You agree with me or not? I'm very sure you will agree with me. If at all some of you say law is difficult, it is because of these three things. Because of case laws, we keep getting confused. So many names, and that too English names. We keep getting confused. So many section numbers, 2 clause 20, 2 clause H, 2 clause A, 2 clause B. We keep getting confused over there. So these 3 papers, if you maintain, whatever is difficult in law, you will have right there in your hands. Okay. So I want you all to maintain these 3 papers properly from the very beginning. Alright. And use it the day before your exam. Alright. Now listen to me. Going to the next part of the discussion. So till now we have discussed number 1 about the syllabus. We have seen what are the chapters in our syllabus. We have learnt about the weightage of each chapters. Then we have discussed about what is the sequence, what is the order that you will follow while studying. Then I gave you a different sequence to study chapters just the day before your examination. And then now I gave you a very important tip to maintain these 3 pieces of paper. Now listen to me. What are the 4 papers in your CA foundation? Number 1, you have accounts. Number 2, you have law. Number 3, you have maths. And number 4, you have economics. If you look at all these 4 papers, out of these 4 papers, you will agree with me that law is the most unfamiliar paper for you all. Because accounts, economics, maths, other 3 papers, you would have studied a little bit in your 11th and 12th. So you would be aware of what exactly is there in these papers already. I don't say just because you have learnt them in 11th and 12th, they are easy papers. I don't say that. But I'm just saying you are at least to some extent comfortable with those other 3 papers. But law, this is going to be the most unfamiliar paper for you all. But the best part is that this paper is not difficult at all if you do some basic smart work. Even if you think, I am a very average student, ma'am. In school, I used to just pass. I used to just get bare 40, 50 in my school. Even if you think like that, even if you think that you were an average student in school, still you can crack it if you follow the rule of 3 C's. I'm going to be talking to you about 3 C's now. If you're going to follow these 3 C's, then even if you think you are an average student, even it doesn't matter. See, till school, whether you were an average student, whether you were a super smart student, doesn't even matter. We all begin afresh with a professional course. Okay, so no matter what you think about yourself, I want all of you to follow these 3 C's which I'm going to show you over here. If you follow these 3 C's, then you will be able to ace this paper very, very easily. Now listen to the 3 C's one by one. The first C I'm going to talk to you about is concept. Focus on the concept. The key is to focus on what? Focus on why. What was the problem? Why was this rule made? Why was the law introduced? This curiosity should be there. When you do that, your analytical skills get better. When you do this, your interest in the paper gets better. You will start finding the subject interesting. Even though law is a pure theory paper, if you are going to be curious, then you will automatically find the paper interesting. Ask questions to yourself. What was this new rule? What is this new law? Why would they have introduced this? Only if there is a problem, they will bring in a solution. So only if something wrong was happening in the country, they would have made a law, they would have made a rule. So what was that problem to solve which they brought this new law? Be curious, ask these questions, get your concept right. Don't just mug. If you're going to just mug, if you're going to just cram all these concepts in your head without understanding the concepts, what will happen? Mugging might have helped you to some extent in school, but mugging is not going to help you anymore in your professional course. Because nowadays, even in CA Foundation, they ask case study based questions. If you've seen examination papers of the past, if you have opened past examination question papers and seen, you will realize that it is not just questions like give the definition of contract or what are the features of partnership. No, it is not such straightforward questions. Even in CA Foundation, they have started giving case study based questions. They'll give you a situation and they'll ask you to examine. They'll give you a situation and they'll ask you who is right, who is wrong. You understand? So your conceptual understanding is extremely important. How strong are you about the concept? It's extremely important. Only when you understand the concept, only when you're curious enough to understand the concept to its very depth, only then will it even make any difference, only then will it make any impact in your entire studying. If you're just going to mug up, it's going to be absolutely useless. And the whole reason is because of these case study based questions. And one more thing what I always tell my students, whenever you study concepts, don't study these concepts as standalone concepts. For example, I'll give you one example. Now first I teach my students what is holding company. Then I teach them about associate company. And then I teach them about government company. Alright, let's see if you can tell me, holding company, what is the number, what is a percentage, or what is a number? In holding company means what? A company which holds how much paid up share capital in the subsidiary company. Tell me. Tell me quick. Rishika, I want you to remember and ask me this question once again towards the end of your session. Alright, you just asked me how to know why in the world of virtuality. Please, in case I forget, please ask me this question again towards the end of the session. Alright, Rishika? Okay, fine. Now I asked a question, I want an answer to that. Please use the chat box. I'll repeat my question again. When I say holding company, what does it mean? A holding company owns how much paid up share capital in the subsidiary company? I have some answers, 50%, 51%, 49%, 51%, more than 51%, 51%, more than 50%, 51%, 51%, so many answers. Out of all these answers, I can find just one correct answer. There is just one correct answer which Aditya has given us. He said more than 50%. Everybody who said 51% is wrong. The correct answer is more than 50%. See, listen to me. There are some things which the law says which we can't change. The law says holding company means a company which owns more than half of the paid up share capital or more than half of the voting power of the subsidiary company. More than half. Half means what? Half means 50%. What is more than half? More than half means more than 50%. Now you don't tell me more than 50% means 51%. No ma'am. No. More than 50% will also mean 50.25%. More than 50 will also be 50.5%. Isn't it? Yashi also had given me the correct answer. I'm sorry, I probably didn't notice. No, Yashi, you said more than 51. I am talking about more than 50. The correct answer is more than 50%. Okay, so more than 50% for holding company. When you say associate company, tell me, associate company holds, what do you mean by associate company? What's the number associated with that? Associate company is a company in which I have how much share capital? Tell me quick. Associate company, what's the number you will associate? 20%? Very good. The very first answer that Ryan has given, at least 20% is correct. So for associate company, the number is at least 20%, which means can be equal to 20, can be more than 20. Then when you learn about government company, tell me what do you learn about government company? What's the number over there? Government company is a company in which the central government plus state governments all put together hold how much percentage capital? What's the percentage over there? Come on, quick answers I want. Basic questions I'm asking you all. In a government company, the central government plus state governments all put together hold how much percentage capital? Let's see the answers. Harsh, where did it start from? Harshit said 51%. Aditya says more than 50%. Ryan says minimum 51%. Then I have more than 50, 51, 49, more than 50, more than 50%. There are some correct answers over here. The correct answer for this is at least 51%. Why 51% over here? Because the law itself uses the number 51%, so we will also use the number 51%. You understand this, guys? So when you study concepts, link them like this. When you study about kinds of companies, you are going to study about all the three. So once you study about all the three, make this table. That holding company means more than half. More than half means more than 50%. Associate company at least 20%. At least 20% means can be equal to 20% or can even be more than 20%. Government company, it's very clearly written at least 51%, which means can't be less than 51%, can be equal to 51% or more than 51%. This is how you link concepts to one another and study. When you study about the memorandum of association, you learn about the objects clause. You learn about what is written in the objects clause. Then when you learn about the doctrine of ultra-vires, there again you learn about the objects clause. So there again a connection is created. You understand, whenever you learn about similar concepts or whenever you learn about two different topics which have a common thread, try to connect them. When you do that, your understanding becomes even better. Okay, your understanding gets better, your confidence over the subject, your hold over the subject gets even stronger. So learn to link concepts like this. Okay, under sale of, I'll give you one more example. I'll give you one more example as to what exactly do I mean by connecting concepts. When you learn Sale of Goods Act, when you learn the definition of goods, you learn that goods even includes shares. Even shares are goods. Do you remember? Yes, you would have studied the definition of this word goods in Sale of Goods Act, and there you would have learned that goods even includes shares. Then when you come to your Companies Act, again you learn about shares. You learn about the meaning of shares. You learned about share means a share in the share capital of the company. So there it should strike you that I also learned about shares under Sale of Goods Act, and there I learned that goods includes shares. When you connect concepts like this, I was actually studying about Companies Act now. But what did I do? By connecting the concept, I was also able to revise one concept under Sale of Goods Act. Immediately think, share I came across even before under Sale of Goods Act. There we learned goods includes shares, and now I am learning about shares. So when I did this thinking process in my mind, what happened? I ended up also revising this point once again. You understand? And then when you continue to learn under the Companies Act, when you learn about the features of a company, you learn that shares are transferable. You learn that shares should be treated like movable property. You learn that shares should be treated like movable property and they are transferable from one person to another. If I am a shareholder of Reliance Industries Limited, doesn't mean I have to continue to hold these shares forever. No. If I want, I can transfer them. Shares are transferable. They should be treated just like any other movable property. This again I will connect with Sale of Goods Act. Why? Sale of Goods Act talks about goods. Sale of Goods Act talks about just movable goods. Isn't it? What is the subject matter of Sale of Goods Act? The subject matter of Sale of Goods Act is goods. And goods are, and what kind of goods are we talking about under Sale of Goods Act? Movable goods. And these goods includes shares. So we have already learnt under Sale of Goods Act that when I talk about goods, I am talking about movable goods, and goods includes shares. So obviously shares are movable. We have already studied about this in Sale of Goods Act, and now that same point is coming again even in my Companies Act. Are you all understanding? I want a response in the chat box. Are you all understanding this sort of a connection which I am making? This is how I have been teaching students, and students have been coming back with amazing feedback about these connections. They say, ma'am, when you do this, when you're teaching and you suddenly talk about a concept which we learned days ago, it becomes a good revision for us once again. You understand? Harshit, I'll talk about sale of goods once again. Please wait. Do you understand this? So this is how connections should be made, because when you do this, you automatically end up revising concepts. I love doing these connections because when I make these connections in class, I ask students to connect this with an older provision. Some will be able to answer, some are not able to answer. And when I get the correct answer, you have no idea the kind of happiness which students feel and which I feel. That you were able to remember a concept which you learned days and days ago. You understand? Now, I'll just repeat this Sale of Goods Act, this particular point once again. Harshit missed it. What was I telling you over here? Sale of Goods Act defines goods. It says goods includes shares. Sale of Goods Act also says that goods may be movable or immovable. But Sale of Goods Act is going to talk about just movable goods. So, 2 points. Goods are only movable goods for Sale of Goods Act perspective, and goods include even shares. So, obviously, shares are also movable. If I say that, let me write it over here. If I say that goods mean I'm talking about just movable goods, and when I say goods include shares, obviously it means that shares are movable, isn't it? And same Companies Act also says that shares are movable, shares can be transferred from one person to another. This is how you were able to make a connection over here between Companies Act and Sale of Goods Act. Are we clear with this, guys? Yes? So this is one point which I want you to remember, that your first C is concept. My first C is concept. I want all of you to be extremely clear about your concepts. Absolutely no cramming, absolutely no mugging. Be curious and try to understand what exactly the concept is, and learn the subject in that manner. And also connect concepts so that you're able to revise things then and there. Okay, now your second C, the most important C, is communicate. Listen to me very, very carefully. What do I have to tell you about this? See, listen to me. This paper is a subjective paper. It is a descriptive paper. It's not MCQ based. This means you should not only know what is the concept, you should also know how to communicate that concept to the examiner. Just knowing the concept is not enough. This is one problem so many students face. Sometimes students fail in the examination. I had a student who failed. This particular student, it came such a surprise. It was not a surprise, it was a shock for me that how could this student fail? He used to give me perfect answers in class, such clear concepts, but he failed. So we asked him to get his verified paper copy, answer copy. And when he showed me his answer copy, his presentation was terrible. Just knowing the concept is not enough. You should also be able to communicate to the examiner that yes, I know the concept. So here, what you write and how you write, that matters. Okay? Because see, all the effort which you have put in the last 9 months, the examiner does not know. What is the only medium between you and the examiner? Your answer paper. So whatever is going to talk to the examiner is just this answer paper, isn't it? It is only the answer paper that is going to talk to the examiner and communicate to the examiner. So when the examiner reads your paper, he must get the vibe that you have prepared for this paper. He must get the vibe that you have studied hard for this paper. Now, how do you create this impression? How do you show the examiner all the knowledge which you have gained over so many months in those 3 hours. In those 3 hours, how do you communicate to the examiner that you have put in effort across the last 9 months? The answer to this question is legal language, technical language. You have to use keywords. You can write the answers in your own words, not a problem. But keywords have to be used here and there. Do you understand what I mean by keywords? Now, for example, what does this word ultra-vires mean? Can you tell me? What does the Latin word ultra-vires mean? Tell me. Ultra-vires means beyond the powers of the company. Okay, if you're writing the meaning of ultra-vires in the examination, and if you write, instead of writing beyond the powers, if you write ultra-vires means something which the company does not have the power to do, you will get only half the mark. Why? Because beyond powers, this is a key word. You can't change this. There's another key phrase. Consideration must move at the desire of the promisor. This is an important word. This is a key phrase. You can't change this phrase and write in your own words. This has to be written as it is. You're understanding? So the kind of language you use in the examination matters. I am not talking about grammatically is your language correct or not. Nobody cares about that. Some technical language, some keywords, some legal terminology here and there you should write. You're understanding? Yes? You get it? So these, now the next, whenever I talk about keywords, whenever I tell my students that you should, write keywords in the examination, the next question I get is, ma'am, so many concepts you teach. Each concept, you're asking us to remember the concept first, and then you're also asking us to remember that concept word to word. Keywords you're asking us to remember. How? How is it even possible? It's very simple. If you have been watching my videos on the LearnCab app, you would have noticed that I just keep asking you all to repeat the concept along with me. Did you notice that? Those of you who are attending the session over here, who have also watched my videos on the LearnCab app, you will notice in every video for every concept, I will keep asking you all to repeat along with me. Why do I do that? Because when you repeat the concept along with the faculty, when your brain hears you speak those concepts again and again, those concepts get registered in your memory. Your brain becomes very familiar with those concepts. You understand? So when your brain becomes familiar with those concepts, when you keep repeating, it becomes easier for us to remember the concept. I use this one example whenever I talk to students. I'll take that same example once again now. As children, when we learnt about Baba Black Sheep for the very first time, when we learnt the Baba Black Sheep rhyme the very first time, Baba Black Sheep, do you have any wool? Did any of you even understand what is the meaning of the rhyme? Did you even understand what is the meaning of the rhyme? In fact, we wouldn't even have gotten half the words correct. We just kept saying the rhyme along with the teacher. We kept singing the rhyme day in and day out, and the rhyme got registered in our memory. Even today, if I ask you, some of you will even be able to tell me that rhyme even today. Why? That time when we learnt, we didn't understand the meaning, but we still kept repeating. Every day morning, the teacher used to ask us to repeat that rhyme. We used to repeat that rhyme. It got registered in our memory. Same way, just imagine if you are going to understand the concept, and then if you are going to keep repeating that concept again and again along with the teacher, what will happen? Are you even able to imagine for how long that concept will stay stuck to your memory? That is the importance of repetition. Had you all been sitting in front of me face to face, I would have made sure each one of you opened your mouth and repeated along with me. But so what if we are sitting at home? We are still having the same old class in front of us, just through a laptop. So wherever you're sitting, open your mouth and keep repeating the concept along with the faculty. You know, one more benefit that this repetition has. My students, you know what they tell me? They tell me, ma'am, we finish off most of our preparation in class itself. How is that possible? That is because of this repetition. When you repeat, you realize the concepts are all there in your memory. You learn off everything with me, with the video. You're watching the video, you're repeating along with the video and done. See, would you tell me what is the point if I'm going to watch a 2 hours class video and if I need another 2 hours at home on my own to study that same concept? Then was it even worth it, me spending those 2 hours in front of the laptop? Was it even worth it for me to spend those 2 hours watching the video if I have to spend another 2 hours at home studying that concept on my own? No, right? That is the whole point of watching videos or attending a class. That as you watch the video, as you listen to the class, you should also study. Your preparation should also happen side by side along with it. You should not require too much time at home studying that same thing again. Alright? And also one more thing, when I talk about communicate, so many students, I'm very sure many of you all also would be wondering how much to write in the examination, how big should my answer be, how many lines I should write, how many pages I should write for an 8-mark question. I am not going to answer that question. There's no standard size of an 8-mark question. See, always remember, focus over the quality and not on the quantity. How much you write, irrelevant. You write pages and pages of things, you write pages and pages of stuff which is not even related to your answer, related to your question, you're not going to get any marks. But if you write one single line which is related to your question, at least some marks you will get. So don't focus on the quantity, focus on the quality. Focus on what you're writing and don't focus on how much you are writing. You're understanding? Don't exaggerate unnecessarily. That will irritate the examiner. Write to the point. Don't write paras and paras. Write whatever you want to write in points, one below the other, neatly, one point after the other. The examiner will find it so easy to correct your paper. Make it easier for him. Okay? And also one more thing. When I talk about communicate, one more point strikes my mind. Writing speed. Those 3 hours you have to write about concepts which you have studied since the last so many months. And you were not able to write. Why? You knew the concepts, you knew the keyword, but still you did not write. Why? Because you are a slow writer. That disappointment is unimaginable. I knew the concept, I knew the keyword, but still I couldn't write by shortage of time. Trust me, CA examinations, all subjects at all 3 levels are very, very, very popular, or I should say unpopular, for being lengthy. Each of your paper is going to be lengthy and you cannot do anything about it. So how do you tackle this lengthy paper? You will tackle it simply by making sure you write fast. Now how to write fast? You will write fast by building your writing speed. Now how to build writing speed? You will build your writing speed by taking down running notes. You should take down running notes during class. Why? There are several reasons. Number 1, it will obviously automatically help you improve your writing speed. It will help you write faster. There you will reach a point, if you take down running notes, genuinely, you will reach a point wherein you are able to write in the same speed in which the faculty is talking. I used to do this, I remember. I wanted to improve my writing speed. I went to my teacher and my professor told me, Anushri, start taking down running notes. Start taking down running notes with me in class. I started doing that. I used to follow that professor. Whatever he used to say, I used to do. So he asked me to do this. I started doing this. I reached a stage wherein whatever he said, every single word of his was in my paper, was in my notebook. I was able to reach a writing speed wherein his talking speed and my writing speed could match. And that is exactly why I was able to finish papers in the examination, because my writing speed was very, very good. So these running notes that you maintain, the biggest advantage they will have is that you will be able to write faster. The second advantage of taking down running notes is that it will keep you awake. If you are writing down, automatically your brain is awake. So even if it's a boring concept, theory, some places will get boring. I don't deny. No matter how much I love teaching law, some concepts here and there are boring. LLP Act you will find extremely boring in some places. Partnership Act, when you learn about some concepts under implied authority, under rights of partners and all, you will find some concepts extremely boring. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But then when you take down running notes, your brain will automatically stay awake and you will be able to, focus on what is being taught. So this is one another benefit of taking down running notes. Alright, so now that I'm talking to you about your examination, you writing the examination, how are you writing the examination, when I'm talking about communicate, side by side, I also want to talk to you about your question paper pattern. Before I come to your third C, I know your third C is pending, but I would like to link this communicate point to your question paper pattern. Your question paper, the 60 marks of your part A, each question will be for 12 marks. Okay, there will be totally 6 questions. Totally 6 questions under business laws. Out of these 6 questions, the first question will be compulsory. You don't have a choice, you have to attempt that first question. Then you will have 5 balance questions. Out of these 5 balance questions, you have a choice. You can write any 4 out of these 5 balance questions. Okay, so totally you will have 6 questions. Out of these 6 questions, your first question is going to be compulsory, and out of the remaining 5, you can pick any 4. Now, which 4 you're going to pick out of those 5? In other words, which question you're going to leave in choice? Which question you're going to write first? Not necessary you have to write the first question first. So, which sequence you are going to write the answers in the examination paper? All this you will decide in the first 15 minutes. You get that 15 minutes of reading time, isn't it? If your examination is from 2 to 5, from 1:45 to 2, you get time to read the examination question paper, isn't it? So, when you are reading the question paper in those 15 minutes, you will make 2 decisions. Decision number 1 that you will make will be, which question will I leave in choice? And decision number 2 that you will make will be, what is the sequence in which I will write the answers in the answer paper? Okay, make a judicious decision over there. You don't have to write answers in the same sequence. You can follow any sequence. But listen to me. Each of these questions will be for 12 marks. Okay. It won't be entire question. You see, when I say question number 1 is for 12 marks, I don't mean there will be one single question for 12 marks. Question number 1 will have sub-questions. Let's say 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. 1A, let's say, for 3 marks. 1B, let's say, for another 3 marks. 1C for 3 marks. 1D for 3 marks. It will go like that. There can be any combination. It can be 1 question for 6 marks, 1 question for 4 marks, 1 question for 2 marks. It can be 3 questions of 4 marks each. It can be any combination, but the total of each question, all sub-questions put together will be 12. Okay. Now, what you should do is that you don't have to write the questions in the same sequence. For example, Let's say I am deciding to write question number 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6. Question number 1 I anyways have to write. 2, 3, 4, 6 I am deciding to choose. I am deciding to skip question number 5 in choice. Okay. So when I am going to write these 5 questions, I don't have to write them in the same sequence. I can write question number 6 first, then I can write question number 2, then I can write question number 1, then question 4, then question 3, any order. But don't break the sequence of sub-questions. For example, if question number 1 has these 4 sub-questions, and let's say question number 2 also has 4 sub-questions, then don't write question number 1A first. Then you're writing question number 2C. Then again you're writing question number 1D. Then you're writing 3A. Don't do this. You're understanding? If you're deciding to write question number 1 first, finish all the sub-questions under question number 1, then go to question number 5. Question number 5, finish all the sub-questions, then go to question number 6. You're understanding what I'm saying? Are you getting confused? Yes, guys? So don't break the question. Sub-questions, write them together. Okay? So remember about this one particular point, alright, about how to write your answers. Now coming to the next point. Your questions in the examination will be both. You will have case study based questions and you will have straightforward questions. Alright? So you will have both case study based questions and you will have straightforward questions. Now straightforward questions I have already told you. Use your keywords. Okay? Knowing the concept is not enough. You also have to communicate with the examiner that you know the concept, and you will be able to do that only if you know the keywords properly. Some legal language, some technical words you have to use here and there. I told you not to unnecessarily elaborate the answer. I told you not to focus on quantity, to focus on quality instead. So straightforward questions, how to attempt, how to communicate to the examiner, you know the answer to these questions, I have already discussed with you. The biggest question a student will have, or the biggest reason why most of you are attending this session today, I am very sure, is to know how to answer case study based questions. Agree with me or not? Yes, most of you are attending the session today just want to know how to answer a case study based question. Alright, now listen to me. Let me tell you about that. In every case study based question, you will be writing 4 things. Number 1, you will start with the facts of the case. Then you will write legal provisions. Then you will write about the application. And then you will write the conclusion. What are the 4 headings? What are the 4 headings? The first heading you will write about the facts of the case. Second heading you will write legal provisions. Third heading will be application. Fourth heading will be conclusion. In the facts of the case, you will write a quick summary of what is the question all about. The question said, let's say the question is a simple question about free consent, coercion. Let's say the question is about coercion. Okay. In the question, let's say it is said that Mr. A has blackmailed B and is asking B to sell his car to him, otherwise he will kill him. A basic case of coercion. So what has happened in this case? A has blackmailed B. So what has happened in the question? You will write briefly under facts of the case. Maximum 2 to 3 points under this, not more than this, because the facts of the case are just like an introduction for your answer. This will not carry any marks. This particular point will not carry any marks. So in fact, I would suggest, if you're running short of time in the examination, you can even skip this. Even skip this facts of the case because it doesn't carry any marks. If you're having time, then for presentation's sake, write down the facts of the case, but maximum 2 to 3 lines. Don't spend too much time in that. What are you going to write over here? You will simply write what has happened in this story. See, I'll show you one example. Listen to this question. In this question X, this is a question relating to the Contract Act, relating to joint promises under Contract Act. Those of you who have already studied Contract Act, who have already studied this concept, you will easily be able to understand the concept. You will be able to give me the answer. Those of you who haven't learnt the concept, the next 5 minutes which I am going to spend on this, please don't focus those 5 minutes on learning the concept. Instead, put those 5 minutes in learning how to present a case study based answer. I have picked this particular question not to teach you the concept of joint promise. I have picked this question to show you how to present the answer. So focus on that and don't focus too much on the understanding of the concept for now, because I am not going to spend too much time on the concept over here. My whole objective over here is to teach you how to present the answer to this question. Listen to me, see what the question says. X, Y and Z are partners in a firm. They jointly promised to pay 3 lakh rupees to D. So X, Y, Z, they are borrowers. They have borrowed money from D. How much? D is a lender. D has lent 3 lakh rupees to X, Y and Z. Then Y became insolvent and his private assets are sufficient to pay only 1/5 of his share of debts. D has lent 3 lakh to the three of them totally. So X's liability will be 1 lakh, Y's liability will be 1 lakh, Z's liability will be 1 lakh. But Y is insolvent. Y won't be able to repay off this entire 1 lakh. He will be able to repay only 1/5 of this 1 lakh. So he will be able to repay only 20,000 out of this 1 lakh. Okay. Examining the provisions of Indian Contract Act, decide the extent to which X can recover the amount from Z. X is compelled to pay the whole amount to D. D is asking X to pay the entire 3 lakhs. So the question is, decide the extent to which X can recover the amount from Z. X has to pay entire 3 lakhs to D. So how much can X recover from Z? You understood the question? X, Y, Z, together they have borrowed 3 lakhs from D. So all of them, their liability will obviously be 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh each. Y has become insolvent. Y won't be able to repay the entire 1 lakh. He will be able to repay only 20,000. In joint promises, there is a concept of joint and several liability, as per which if D wants, D can ask one single person to pay the entire amount. So D has asked X, let's say, to repay the entire amount, and X is going to repay entire 3 lakh to D. The question is, how much can X now recover from Z? See, because X's liability was just 1 lakh, but he had to pay entire 3 lakh rupees to D. So he paid 2 lakh rupees extra. So out of this 2 lakh rupees extra, how much can X recover from Z? That is the question in front of you right now. Okay. A typical case study based question, a very difficult case study based question I have picked. Listen to me. How do you start answering a case study based question? What did I tell you? First step is facts of the case. So first step, I will write maximum 2 to 3 points. I will just write a summary of what is the question saying. X, Y, Z are partners who owe 3 lakh rupees to D. They have together borrowed 3 lakh rupees from D. Y is insolvent. Y will be able to pay only 1/5 of his due. And D is asking Y for the entire repayment. Entire 3 lakh D is asking from Y. So in simple 3 lines, I gave a summary of the entire question. Okay, so this is how you will start the discussion. This is how you will start the answer. Then you will write about the legal provisions. Second heading, remember? Second heading, legal provisions. By the way, before I talk about legal provisions, is anybody having any questions relating to facts of the case? Did you understand about facts of the case? Yes? Simple summary of whatever has happened in the story. Okay? So you want to read it once again? You want to read once again what is written over here? So just simple 3 points. They borrowed money from D. One of them went insolvent. He can pay only 1/5. And D is asking X for the entire payment. Now coming to legal provisions. This is the most important part of your answer. This is the place where maximum marks will be allotted. Under legal provisions, listen to me very carefully, okay? Under legal provisions, you are not even going to talk about X, Y, Z, D. You are not even going to talk about the people in the story. You are not going to talk about the story. Instead, in the legal provisions part, you are going to talk about those concepts which you have studied which are applicable to this case before you. You understand? I'll repeat what I just said. Under the legal provisions point, you are going to write about those concepts which you have studied which are applicable to this case. Now to this case in front of me, the first concept which is applicable is a joint promise. This is a case of a joint promise. So first I will identify that. When two or more persons make a promise to one or more persons, it is called a joint promise. Now then I will write the next concept, that in joint promise, the promisors have joint and several liability. In a joint promise, liability of the joint promisors is joint and several. Then I will explain what is joint and several. The promisee may ask one of the joint promisors to perform the entire promise. In such cases, such joint promisor may ask other joint promisors to contribute equally. If any joint promisor defaults, loss arising from his default shall be borne by other joint promisors equally. Did you see what is written over here? Did you first of all notice I didn't write down these legal provisions as one whole paragraph. Instead, I broke down the paragraph into 4 points. I did not unnecessarily elaborate too much. I wrote to the point. I wrote what is joint promise. I wrote about the related concepts of joint and several liability. I explained about joint and several liability, that if the promisee wants, he can ask one of the promisers to perform the entire promise. But then it is unfair, isn't it? Because he is performing the entire thing. So because it is unfair, he can ask, the person who is performing can ask the other promisers to contribute. Which, see, let me tell you the concept first. The concept goes like this. D, the lender, can ask X can pay off the entire 3 lakh. But then X is paying 2 lakh rupees extra. So whatever extra X pays, X can recover that extra from the other 2 promisers. X can recover that 2 lakh extra which he paid from the other 2 promisers Y and Z. That is the concept. Okay. So I wrote down the concept as we learned in proper legal language with keywords I have written. Okay. Now listen to me. This is the second part. If you notice in the second part, I did not use the words X, Y, Z, D. No. I am not talking about the question. I am just talking about those concepts which relate to the question. Then in the third part, I will apply the legal provisions to the question. Whatever legal concepts I just wrote about, I will apply them to the question. First, I will say that in this question there is a joint promise. Liability of X, Y and Z is joint and several. D is not wrong in demanding the entire payment from X. So basically I am going to apply those provisions which I just wrote to the given question. That yes, it's a joint promise. So joint and several liability. So if D wants, D can ask one person X to repay the entire amount. It is not wrong. But then X can ask the other joint promisers Y and Z to contribute equally. Remember, we just studied under the legal provisions that in such cases, such joint promisor may ask other joint promisers to contribute equally, isn't it? So that same point I am applying over here, that in such cases, if X wants, X can ask the other joint promisers, that is Y and Z, to contribute 1 lakh rupees each. But because Y is insolvent and can pay only 1/5 of his share, that is, he can pay only 1 lakh into 1/5, he can pay only 20,000. So Y has defaulted for the balance 80,000. Such 80,000 shall be borne by X and Z equally. X shall bear the loss of 40,000, Z shall bear rupees 40,000. Okay, so did you see what I did under the applications? Under the applications, I just applied the legal provisions to my case. The legal provision says the promisee can ask even one of the joint promisors to perform. So that's what we wrote the first point. D can ask just one of the joint promisors X to pay off the entire 3 lakh. But 2 lakh rupees extra he is paying. The 2 lakh rupees extra which he is paying, we just learnt under the legal provisions, the joint promisor who is paying extra can ask other promisors to contribute. So X can ask Y and Z to contribute. But problem, what is the problem? Y is insolvent. Y can contribute only 20,000. So from Y we will, so see, X paid totally 3 lakh, Y will contribute 20,000, Z will contribute 1 lakh. Okay, so how much extra did he end up paying? Come on, tell me. How much extra did X end up paying? X ended up paying 1,80,000 from his own pocket. Out of 1,80,000 which he paid from his own pocket, 1 lakh is his own share, isn't it? He has paid totally 1,80,000 from his own pocket. 3 lakh, 3 people, so 1 lakh is his own share. So how much extra he has paid even beyond his share? 80,000. What is this 80,000? Nothing but the amount which Y has defaulted. This 80,000, both X and Z will bear equally. So X will bear 40,000 and Z will bear the balance 40,000. You understand this? So how much is X going to recover from Z? 1 lakh he is going to recover. He is also going to recover this 40,000 from Z. All this I wrote under application. Then lastly, one conclusion I will write. In that conclusion, I will simply say the total, that yes, X will recover totally 1,40,000 from Z. Did you understand, guys? Are we clear with this? Some of you wouldn't have, all those of you who don't know this concept might not have understood. But at least you've learned how to, write the answer. Forget about the concept. You would have at least understood about how to write the discussion, how to write the points in the examination, isn't it? So this is the way in which you should handle your case study based questions. Totally 4 parts. You will be having number 1, the facts of the case. Then number 2, you will be writing about legal provisions. Then you will write the application of the legal provisions to your question. And then lastly, you will be writing a small conclusion, 1 or 2 lines where you're giving your final answer. Alright, okay, fine. Now listen to me. I don't want to rush too much. There are some important points. I had so much to tell you all. I don't want to skip those points. So that's another 15 minutes. I won't take more than that. Alright. So I was telling you all about the 3 C's. Under concept, I told you, don't just mug up things. Also understand the concept, understand what the law is actually saying and why is it so. Then I told you just knowing the concept is not enough. You'll also have to tell the examiner you know the concept. How will you tell that to the examiner? By using keywords. I put full focus, full stress on keywords. I told you to use keywords in the examination. I told you how to remember these keywords by repeating along with the teacher, so that your brain registers those words in your memory. Then here I also spoke to you about how to present answers in the examination. Straightforward question, don't elaborate too much, write to the point. Don't write paras and paras, write in points instead. And then I told you if it's a case study based question, do it in these 4 parts. Part A, write the facts of the case, nothing but what has happened in the question. Part 2, just write about the concepts which this question is all about. Don't talk about the case in the legal provisions, just talk about the concepts. Part 3, you are applying the concepts to your question. And part 4, just one line conclusion, that X will recover 1,40,000 from Z. So one of you was asking me to explain after, there was this one question, please explain after 1 lakh, after deducting X's share. So after I deducted X's share, X paid 80,000 extra. This 80,000 extra is nothing but the amount which Y has defaulted, isn't it? Y was supposed to pay 1 lakh, but Y was able to pay only rupees 20,000. So 80,000 was Y's default. That 80,000 X and Z have to bear equally. So at 80,000, 40,000 will be borne by X, 40,000 will be borne by Z. This 40,000, this 80,000 is split between the other two promisors X and Z. So total amount which Z will pay will be 1 lakh plus this 40,000. Did you understand? The student who had asked, Harshit, are you okay with this 1 lakh 40 now? I'm sure this by now you would be okay with this. Alright, now listen to me. So the first two C's I spoke to you about. The last C is consistency. Now listen, you've learnt the concept. You've also learnt the keywords. But will they stay stuck in your memory forever and ever? Of course not. Many times students come with a common complaint, I studied this chapter, ma'am, I studied this so well, but now when I'm opening the book, it is looking so fresh for me. It is looking as if I never studied this ever before. It is normal. It will happen like that. If you are able to remember everything you studied word to word, something abnormal about you, you will forget. That is a shortcoming of human memory. But there is this next rule of consistency which will help you solve this problem at least to some extent. When I say consistency, I am talking about you reading that same thing again and again. When I was studying, I used to follow this rule wherein my Sunday used to be just for revising. I would not study a new concept on a Sunday. From Monday to Saturday, whatever I studied, I used to revise on Sunday. Entire month, whatever I studied, I used to revise on the last day of the month. These frequent revisions, if you're going to do, if you're going to keep revising that same thing again and again, if you're going to keep seeing the same thing again and again, your brain will be able to capture a picture from your book. Later when you're recalling, the brain will show you that picture. You will be able to visualize your book. In my book, left hand side corner on top, I read something. There was a heading over there. You will be able to start picturizing your book like that. It will be possible only if you keep revising it again. You should keep seeing it. Consistently, you should keep reading that same thing again and again. Test yourself. Write mock test papers. LearnCabs, the app conducts so many mock tests. You have these mock sessions, these exam sessions, these test paper sessions. Attend them. Write. More you write, the more you test yourself, the more you will revise. And the more you revise, the more you see the same thing again and again, the longer it will stay in your memory. Okay? See, your aim should not be just passing. None of you should ever say, no rank and all I don't want. Why don't you want a rank? No rank and all I can't get. I am not that good and all. Why? The people who get a rank, are they a different species altogether? No, right? The only difference is the amount of hard work you put in. So your aim should not be just passing. Your aim should be to get a rank. The way a rank will decorate your resume, it's incomparable. One is passing and the other is getting a rank. Both are good, but getting a rank is even better. So you should aim for a rank. You should want to get a rank and you should be disciplined enough to want to keep revising the same thing again and again so that you get that rank. See, it will be very painful, okay? I always say this, that the pain of discipline is far less than the pain of regret. Discipline is painful. On a Sunday, when all your other friends are chilling out there, going for parties, going to restaurants, having nice food, sitting at home, nicely chilling in front of Netflix, what are you doing? You are sitting with a book and revising. Yes, it will hurt you. But also remember that later on, if you're going to regret, the pain of regret will be far more than the pain of discipline. Later on, if you're going to regret, oh, I got less marks, I should have studied harder, I should have revised more, I should have spent more time with my books, I shouldn't have watched so many unnecessary binge watch. I shouldn't have binge watched so much unnecessarily. When you have all these regrets later on, it's far more painful than the pain of discipline. So from the very beginning, put in consistent effort. Generally, what happens when you start learning, the first few days when you would have started your CA foundation course, full over enthusiastic you would have been. Every day's class, every day you would have gone home and revised and studied. But later on, it would have kept getting lesser. Your enthusiasm would have kept falling. That shouldn't happen. Your enthusiasm should be consistent. You should keep yourself motivated. Here, what you talk to yourself and what you tell yourself makes a huge difference. You understand? No amount of my motivation will affect you. No amount of me motivating you will not have any impact on you unless you motivate your own self. There is nothing like self-motivation. Talk to yourself. Tell yourself that you will do this, that you will get a rank, that you will be disciplined, that you will spend effort in learning the paper, and it will be possible. Alright, so one simple thing, if you want something, put in the effort and go get it. Alright, now listen to me. So I've told you about the 3 C's. I've spoken to you about concept, I've spoken to you about communication, and I've spoken to you about consistency. All the 3 rules, if you're going to follow, then you should easily be able to crack this paper of business law. I'm very sure. Now, if you look at the classes, if you look at the videos which we have uploaded on the LearnCab app, what is the approach that we have followed in these videos? Number 1, the kind of examples I have used to explain concepts to you are very, very effective examples. Some real life examples, some stories which will help you remember concepts for really, really long. A paper like business law, you need enough number of examples to be able to understand concepts and relate to them. Alright, so number 1, a lot of examples are in there in those videos to help you all understand concepts better, because conceptual clarity comes first. Number 2, the depth in which I have gone in each video, in each playlist, is to that extent that it will help you tackle the most difficult paper. If we are prepared for one level above what the examiner is expecting from us, then we will easily be able to handle even the most difficult of the papers. So this is what I have kept in mind when we have recorded the videos. The depth is actually a little more than what is required at your level. But that much depth will help you in case the examination is an extremely difficult question paper. Alright. Then number 3, like how I already told you, you will be able to finish most of your preparation with me while you watch the videos, because you're going to keep repeating along with me. And then there was this one question which Rishika had asked somewhere in the middle of the session, which I had asked her to remind me a little later. She was asking that how do I be curious in this world of virtuality? See, listen to me. If you have questions, if you have something which you don't understand, if there is something which you want to discuss a little more with the faculty, we've realized that students have this need, and that is why we have decided to come up with live doubt solving sessions. So this way, the sessions that you're going to watch will be a mixture of recorded sessions and live online sessions. You watch the concept in the recorded session. You watch the theory, you learn the concept in the recorded session, and whatever question you have, you will keep noting down. We'll have a live online session for each chapter maybe, or for the entire subject maybe, we'll plan, and in those live online sessions, you can keep getting your doubts clarified. This mixture of recorded videos and live online doubt solving sessions, this combination of both of these features is going to be extremely helpful for you. I'll tell you why. Because the concepts are all recorded and given to you, you can watch them at your convenience. Early morning, late night, whenever you want, you can watch them. But you also know that there are going to be some live sessions wherein you can have one-on-one discussions with your faculty and get your questions clarified. So you get to enjoy the benefit of both. You get to enjoy the best benefit of recorded lectures, which is that you can watch them whenever you want at your convenience, and you also get the benefit of live online sessions wherein you can talk to your faculty, communicate with the faculty and get the doubts clarified. Alright, and then we also will have these model examinations, these model test papers being conducted in the app, which you can subscribe to, which you can write and attend. Alright, so this is how we at LearnCabs are trying to help you all deal with this paper of business laws. And this approach which I have followed over here, the way I told you, giving you all these effective examples so that you get your concepts clear, making you prepare for a level which is one level above what the examiner is expecting from you. Doing all this over the last, the entire period since when these lectures have gone live, there has been tremendous feedback. There has been great feedback where students say that this approach has worked. Students have scored amazing marks, and it all goes to these 2 points of getting the concepts clear and preparing for one level above what the examiner wants. So this approach has worked, and it has worked tremendously for many students. Alright, now before I conclude, before I go into the question and answer session, some students had also asked for this. They had asked for what are the areas to focus on for May 2021 examination. I'll just quickly tell you all in each chapter which concepts, in my opinion, are important for May 2021 exams. I have not given these concepts over here, I have not given these lists over here randomly. Chosen these concepts after a thorough analysis of how the past papers have been. So under the Contract Act, my best bet goes to these 3 chapters: your consideration chapter, your free consent chapter, and your breach of contract chapter. I am not saying study just these chapters, I am just saying these are the important chapters which you should put some extra focus on. Alright, consideration, free consent, and your breach of contract. If I am going to talk about the Sale of Goods Act, the chapters which you should be focusing on: implied conditions and warranties, then your transfer of property chapter. Your under the transfer of property chapter, you also have exceptions to Nemo that called non-habit. You know about this, right? General rule is that only if I have something, I can give you something. If I don't have it, I can't give you. So if I don't own goods, I can't give you a title in the goods. But then there are exceptional cases wherein even though I am not the owner of the goods, I am able to give you the ownership in the goods. That is exceptions to Nemo that called non-habit. What are these exceptions? Nothing but those cases wherein even though I don't own the goods, I can still give you ownership in the goods. Alright, so that is about this point. And then unpaid seller. Who is an unpaid seller and what are the rights of the unpaid seller? Your right of lien, your right of stoppage in transit, all that comes under this. Even that is important for your Sale of Goods Act chapter. Okay, and then coming to your next, your Partnership Act, your next chapter. Under Partnership Act, I would say the important concepts would be: number 1, rights and duties of partners; number 2, implied authority; and number 3, dissolution of partnership, both voluntary dissolution and compulsory dissolution, both. Alright, so rights and duties of partners is the right of the partner to get a share in profits, the right of your partner to have access to books of accounts, all that. The duties of partners, duty to be loyal, the duty to not misuse the partnership property, all those points. Implied authority, the ability or the power of the partner to bind the other partners by his actions, that comes under implied authority. And then dissolution of partnership, bringing an end to the partnership voluntarily and compulsory situations. Then under LLP Act, the important concepts should be features of an LLP. How is it different from a company? How is it different from a partnership? And about the LLP agreement. What are the contents of the LLP agreement? Okay, features of LLP, LLP agreement, and differences between LLP and the other forms of organization. Okay, then under Companies Act, the important chapters would be number 1, corporate veil, the lifting of corporate veil. What are the cases in which the corporate veil will be lifted? Then the different kinds of companies, the Memorandum of Association chapter, where you learn about the 6 clauses of the Memorandum of Association, and then the doctrines. There are totally 3 doctrines in your Companies Act syllabus. Number 1, you have the doctrine of ultra vires. Then number 2, you have the doctrine of constructive notice. And then lastly, you have the doctrine of indoor management. So these 4, according to me, are important areas under your Companies Act. Corporate veil, kinds of companies, the 6 clauses of your MOA, and lastly the 3 doctrines. Alright guys, so pay a little extra attention on these topics. Have your concepts super clear. Practice, 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 and do your very best. Every moment of hard work will be so worth it. It will make a difference. Alright, so I hope you all were able to get at least something constructive out of this session that we had today. And this is just the beginning. We'll be having more and more webinars lined up for you. Webinars on law, webinars for different subjects, live doubt solving sessions in the coming months. Alright, so stay updated. We'll let you all know about the upcoming sessions. We'll make a schedule and let you all know. Please keep attending these sessions. You will have something constructive to take out of each of these sessions.
Subscribe to LearnCab and hit the bell icon to get notified.